The space around the Rigel sector looked empty and peaceful. Stars dotted the black like tiny diamonds. But looks can lie. Hidden in that darkness was the biggest war fleet the Valtharian Empire had ever sent to conquer new worlds. Fleet Admiral Kextar stood on the bridge of his massive flagship, the Eternal Dominion. His forearms moved across control panels with practiced ease. His red eyes watched the main screen that showed hundreds of green dots. Each dot was one of his ships, 347 vessels in total, destroyers, cruisers, battleships, and dreadnoughts, all ready to crush any enemy that dared to stand against the Empire. The Admiral's skin was gray and rough, like old leather. Scars from many battles marked his face and arms. He had fought in 32 major wars for the Empire. He had never lost a single battle. Today would not be his first defeat. "Report," Kextar said to his bridge crew. His voice was deep and harsh. "All ships in formation, Admiral," replied his second-in-command, a younger Valtharian named Zethuk. "We are ready to jump to the human colony worlds." Kextar nodded. The humans were a new species. They had only been in space for a few hundred years. The Empire had been conquering worlds for over 10,000 years. This should be easy, quick, clean. The humans had 3 small colonies in this sector. Intelligence reports said they had maybe 50 ships total to defend all 3 worlds. Kextar had brought almost 7 times that number. It would be over in hours. On the sensor station, operator Vithal ran his daily scans. His job was boring most days. Look for asteroids, check for space storms, make sure no enemy ships were sneaking up on them. Today felt like any other day. Vithal was young for a Valtharian. His skin was still smooth and bright gray. He had only been in the fleet for 2 years. This was his first big battle. He was excited and nervous at the same time. The sensor sweep started at the front of the formation and moved outward in a wide circle. Nothing unusual, just empty space and distant stars. Then the sweep reached the edge of their sensor range. Contact appeared on his screen. Vithal blinked his large black eyes. He ran the scan again. The contact was still there, moving toward them. "Contact bearing 27 Mark IV, he called out. His voice cracked a little. "Single ship, range, 800,000 kilometers. "What type of ship?" asked Zethok Vithal. Worked his controls. The computer analyzed the contact's energy signature. What he saw made his blood go cold. "Sir, it's broadcasting human identification codes." The bridge went silent. Every officer turned to look at the sensor station. Admiral Kextar's 4 hands stopped moving across his controls. "Repeat that," the Admiral said slowly. "Human warship, sir. Definitely human. It's coming right at us." 800,000 kilometers away, Captain Lee Dae-ho sat in the command chair of the UES Indomitable. His ship was small compared to the alien monsters they had just detected. The Indomitable was a destroyer, fast and tough but tiny next to the enemy fleet. Lee was 42 years old. His black hair was starting to show gray at the sides. He had been in the Earth Defense Force for 20 years. He had fought pirates, aliens, and rebels, but he had never seen anything like this. "Captain," said Lieutenant Commander Kim So-young from the tactical station, "I count over 300 enemy vessels. That's an entire battle fleet." Lee nodded calmly. He looked at the main screen. Red dots filled the display. So many red dots that they looked like a cloud of angry stars. "How did we miss them?" asked Navigation Officer Oh-tae-young. "Their stealth systems are better than we thought," Lee replied. "The question is, why did ours fail now?" Chief Engineer Choi Min-ho's voice came over the ship's communication system. "Captain, we have a problem down here. The stealth generator just died. Main power coupling burned out. I can fix it, but I need at least 6 hours." 6 hours. They would all be dead in 6 minutes if the aliens decided to attack. "Orders, sir?" asked Kim So-young. Lee thought for a moment. They had 3 choices. They could run. They could hide behind an asteroid and hope the aliens did not find them. Or they could do something that no sane captain would do. They could attack. "All stop," Lee ordered. "Sir?" Oh-tae-young looked confused. "You heard me. All stop." turn us, to face the enemy fleet. The bridge crew looked at each other. Their captain had just ordered them to stop running and face an entire alien armada, with one ship. Back on the Eternal Dominion, chaos was starting to spread. The word human was being whispered from station to station. Officers who had been calm and confident moments before now looked worried. Admiral Kextar had heard the stories. Every military officer in the galaxy had heard the stories about humans. They were supposed to be crazy, unpredictable. They did things that made no sense, things that should not work, but somehow did. There was the Battle of Kepler Station. 50. Human ships had held off 400 Zephyrian vessels for 6 days. The humans should have been wiped out in the first hour. Instead, they used tactics that no civilized species would even think of. They turned cargo ships into bombs. They used gravity wells as weapons. They fought like wild animals. Then there was the Proxima incident. A human cruiser was dying. Its reactor was melting down. Instead of abandoning ship, the human captain flew his ship right into the middle of an enemy formation and let the reactor explode. Took out 12 alien ships with him, and everyone had heard about Captain Sarah Chen. She rammed her crippled destroyer through the bridge of a Corvallian dreadnought. Killed herself and the enemy admiral with one crazy move. Humans did not fight. Like normal species, they did not follow the rules of war. They were unpredictable. "Sir?" Vithal called out. His voice was shaking now. "The human ship has stopped. It's turning toward us." Admiral Kextar stared at the main screen. The single green dot that represented the human ship was indeed turning to face his massive fleet. One ship against 347. "What are they doing?" whispered Zethuk. Nobody answered. Nobody knew what humans might do. On the Indomitable, Captain Lee was thinking, the aliens had superior numbers, superior firepower, superior technology, but they also had something else. Something that might be their weakness. They had fear. "Communications," Lee said to Corporal Park Jiwoo. "Are you picking up any alien transmissions?" "Yes, sir. Lots of chatter on their command frequencies." "Sir, they sound nervous." Lee smiled for the first time since the crisis began. "Nervous is good. Nervous makes people make mistakes." "Captain," Kim So-young said quietly, "what's the plan?" Lee looked at his crew. Good people. Brave people. They trusted him to get them home alive. He would not let them down. "The plan is simple," he said. "We're going to do what humans do best." "Which is?" asked Oh Tae-young. "Something they won't expect." The Indomitable finished its turn. Its bow now pointed directly at the center of the alien formation. The ship sat still in space, waiting, watching. On hundreds of alien ships, sensor operators reported the same thing. The human vessel had stopped. It was facing them, and it was not moving. What were they planning? Fear began to spread through the Valtharian fleet like a virus. Officers who had been confident in victory now wondered what trick the humans were preparing, what trap they were walking into. Admiral Kextar gripped his command chair with all 4 hands. One human ship should not be able to make his entire fleet nervous. But it was happening. He could see it in his officers' faces, hear it in their voices. The humans were 300 million kilometers from Earth. They were alone, outnumbered, outgunned. And somehow they had already started winning. The battle had not even begun, and the Admiral could feel his perfect formation starting to crack. Fear was a powerful weapon, and the humans, it seemed, knew how to use it very well. In the dark space between the fleets, tension built like pressure in a sealed container. Something was about to break, and when it did, the explosion would change everything. The news spread through the Valtharian fleet like wildfire. Human ship detected. The words traveled from bridge to bridge through encrypted communications, but fear has a way of making even the most secure channels leak. On the heavy cruiser, Dark Spear, Captain Vexmon received the alert from Fleet Command. His hands shook as he read the message. He had been at the Battle of Kepler Station. He had seen what humans could do. All hands to battle stations, he ordered. Charge weapons, raise shields, deploy countermeasures. His crew moved quickly, but he could see the worry in their eyes. They had heard the stories too. 3 ships away, aboard the destroyer Swift. Strike. Captain Nixtal was having the same thoughts. She remembered the intelligence briefings about human tactics. Humans did not fight fair. They used tricks, traps, suicide attacks. Scan for cloaked ships, she ordered her sensor officer. The humans might have more vessels hidden nearby. Her sensor officer, a nervous young Valtharian named Kellas, worked his controls frantically. Nothing on sensors, Captain. But human stealth technology is very advanced. They could be anywhere. The fear was growing. Ship by ship, captain by captain, the infection spread. On the Indomitable, Corporal Park Jiwoo listened to them. Alien communications with growing amazement. His translation computer worked hard to decode the Valtharian language. Captain, he called out. You need to hear this. The aliens are panicking. Captain Lee moved to the communication station. He put on a headset and listened to the alien chatter. Even through the electronic translation, he could hear the fear in their voices. Fleet Command, this is Dark Spear. Request permission to move to defensive formation. The humans might have cloaked ships. Swift strike to all vessels. Recommend full sensor sweep. Humans are known to use stealth technology. This is Iron Fist. Captain requests orders. Should we advance or withdraw? Lee smiled. The alien fleet was 347 ships strong, but they were already scared. Fear was making them weak. Tactical, he said to Kim So-young. What's their formation looking like now? Kim studied her displays. Sir, it's interesting. They're not advancing anymore. Some ships are clustering together for mutual protection. Others are spreading out. They're breaking their attack formation. Good, Lee said. Fear makes people do stupid things. Lieutenant Commander Kim So-young had served with Captain Lee for 3 years. She trusted him completely, but even she was confused by his calm attitude. Sir, she said quietly, there are over 300 enemy ships out there. Even if they're scared, they still have enough firepower to turn us into space dust. True, Lee agreed. But scared enemies make mistakes, and we're going to help them make a big one. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Kextar watched his perfect formation fall apart. Captains were requesting new orders every few minutes. Some wanted to advance and attack immediately. Others wanted to fall back and observe. A few were asking permission to jump to hyperspace and get reinforcements. Admiral, his communications officer reported, Captain Vexmon is requesting permission to launch fighters. He thinks the humans might attack his engines. Kextar's 4 hands clenched into fists. The human ship is 800,000 kilometers away. It would take them 20 minutes to reach us at full speed. Why is everyone panicking? But even as he said it, he knew the answer. The humans had a reputation built on impossible victories and crazy tactics. Sometimes reputation was more powerful than weapons. Sir, sensor operator Vythal called out, the human ship is doing something. Every officer on the bridge turned to look at the main display. The single green dot that represented the human destroyer was moving. Very slowly, very deliberately. They're accelerating toward us, Vythal reported. Speed, 0.05 light speed and increasing. The bridge went silent. The human ship was coming right at them. One ship attacking an entire fleet. Orders, sir? Asked Zethok. Admiral Kextar stared at the display. His military training told him this was impossible. No sane captain would attack a fleet this size with a single ship, unless it was a trap. That had to be it. The human ship was bait. There must be more ships hidden nearby, cloaked ships, or ships hiding in the asteroid field, or behind the gas giant. Full sensor sweep, he ordered. Find the rest of their fleet. On the Indomitable, Chief Engineer Choi Minho worked frantically in the engine room. Sparks flew from damaged control panels. The smell of burned electronics filled the air. Captain, he called over the intercom. The stealth system is completely dead. I can give you speed, weapons, or shields, But not all three. The power grid can't handle it. Lee thought quickly. Speed would let them run away, but there was nowhere to run. Weapons would let them fight, but they were outnumbered 300 to 1. Shields would let them survive longer, but not long enough. Give me weapons, he decided. If we're going to die, we're going to make it hurt. Aye, sir. Weapons at full power. The Indomitable continued its slow advance toward the alien fleet. On every enemy ship, sensor operators tracked its progress. The human destroyer was like a single shark swimming toward a school of fish. A very big, very dangerous school of fish. Captain Vexmon on the Dark Spear could not stand the tension anymore. That's it. I'm not waiting for them to attack us. All weapons. Target the human ship. His weapons officer looked confused. Sir, they're still 700,000 kilometers away. Our weapons won't be accurate at that range. I don't care. Fire everything we have. The Dark Spear opened fire. Energy beams and missiles streaked across space toward the Indomitable. At that range, most of the shots would miss. But it made Vexmon feel better to be doing something. Other ships saw the weapons fire and panicked. If the Dark Spear was shooting, the battle must have started. More ships opened fire. Then more. Within minutes, dozens of Valtharian vessels were shooting at the lone human destroyer. Admiral Kextar watched in horror as his disciplined fleet dissolved into chaos. Cease fire! He shouted into his communications system. All ships, cease. Fire immediately. But it was too late. The panic had spread too far. Ship captains who had been calm and professional moments before were now shooting at shadows and jumping at every sensor contact. On the Indomitable, Lieutenant Zhang Wujin monitored the incoming weapons fire. Captain, they're shooting at us. Most of the shots are going wide, but a few might hit. Evasive maneuvers, Lee ordered. But stay on course. We need to look like we know what we're doing. Navigator Oh Tae-young worked his controls. The Indomitable twisted and turned through space, dodging the worst of the alien fire. A few energy beams grazed their shields, but caused no real damage. Sir, Communications Specialist Park Ji-woo reported, the alien chatter is getting worse. Some ships are reporting multiple human contacts. Others think they're being jammed. One captain is convinced we've deployed some kind of new weapon. Lee laughed. It was not a happy laugh. We have deployed a new weapon. It's called their imagination. The human destroyer continued its advance. Alone, outnumbered, but somehow winning a battle that had not even really started yet. On the destroyer Swift Strike, Captain Nixtal watched her sensors with growing horror. Every few seconds, a new contact appeared on her screen, then disappeared, then appeared somewhere else. Sensor ghosts, her operator reported. Could be stealth ships, could be electronic warfare, could be anything. Nixtal made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her career. All ships in the 3rd Squadron, form up on us. Defensive formation. If the humans want to fight, we'll give them one. But as her ships moved to form up, they accidentally blocked the firing lines of the ships behind them. More confusion. More shouting on the communication channels. The perfect Valtharian formation was collapsing. Fear was eating it from the inside like acid. Admiral Kextar watched his life's work crumble before his eyes. 30 years of military service, hundreds of victories, and now one human ship was destroying his fleet without firing a shot. Sir, his tactical officer reported, we're getting reports of contact with human forces from 17 different ships, but our sensors only show one vessel. Then the other reports are false, Kextar said. Or the humans have better stealth technology than we thought. Or our crews are seeing things that aren't there because they're scared. The tactical officer did not answer. They both knew which explanation was most likely. In the distance, the Indomitable continued its approach. Still alone. Still coming. Still somehow winning a battle against impossible odds. The legend of human unpredictability was becoming reality. And the Valtharian Empire was learning why every species in the galaxy had learned to fear the mention of human warships. Fear was a weapon, and humans, it seemed, were very good at using it. Captain Lee Daeho studied the tactical display with the focus of a chess master. The alien fleet was spread across space like scattered marbles. Their perfect attack formation was gone. In its place was chaos. Distance to enemy fleet? He asked. 600,000 kilometers and closing, Navigator Ote Young reported. At current speed, we'll reach weapons range in 18 minutes. Lee nodded. 18 minutes to figure out how to survive this. Or 18 minutes to make their deaths count for something, Captain, Kim So-young said from the tactical station. I've been watching their formation. They're making mistakes, big ones. Show me. Kim highlighted different sections of the alien fleet on the main display. Look at this. 3 squadrons have clustered together for protection, but they're blocking each other's firing lines, and this group here has spread out so far that they can't support each other if we attack. Lee smiled. Fear was indeed making them stupid. Communications, he said to Park Ji-woo. I want to send a message to the alien fleet. Sir? Park looked confused. Broadcast on all frequencies. Use their language but make the translation rough, like we learned it from captured prisoners. Park's fingers moved across his console. Ready, sir? What do you want to say? Lee thought for a moment. The right words could make this work. The wrong words would get them all killed. Human vessel approaching. Prepare for boarding operations. Park typed the message into his translation system. The computer converted it to Valtharian, but Lee had told him to make it sound crude. Like humans who barely understood the alien language. Message ready, sir. Send it. The transmission burst across space at the speed of light. On every alien ship, communications officers received the same crude message. Human vessel approaching. Prepare for boarding operations. The effect was immediate and devastating. On the heavy cruiser Dark Spear, Captain Vexmon read the message and felt his blood turn to ice. Boarding operations. The humans were going to try to capture alien ships. All sections prepare for boarding defense, he ordered. Seal all airlocks, arm security teams, deploy battle droids in the corridors. His crew rushed to obey. Internal blast doors slammed shut throughout the ship. Marines ran to their positions with weapons ready. The ship went from normal operations to siege mode in minutes. But Vexmon knew the stories about human boarders. They were said to be unstoppable in close combat. They fought with knives and bare hands when their guns ran out of bullets. They never surrendered, never retreated. How could one human destroyer board a ship that was 600,000 kilometers away? Unless there were more ships, hidden ships, cloaked ships that were already close to his vessel. Full sensor sweep, he ordered. Find those cloaked ships. The same scene played out on dozens of alien vessels. Captains who had been focused on fleet tactics suddenly shifted to anti-boarding procedures. Ships that should have been advancing to attack instead turned their sensors inward, looking for threats that did not exist. Admiral Kextar received reports from across his fleet, ships going to alert status, crews preparing for boarding actions, captains requesting permission to break formation to avoid capture. What are they doing? He asked his tactical officer. The humans sent a message, sir. They said they're preparing for boarding operations. Kextar stared at the display. The human ship was still 600,000 kilometers away. How could they board anything at that distance? Then it hit him. This was exactly what humans would do. Send a message that made no sense to confuse and frighten their enemies. Make them think about impossible threats instead of real ones. But even knowing it was a trick did not make it less effective. His captains were already panicking. Some were requesting permission to withdraw. Others wanted to cluster together for mutual protection. A few were asking for additional ships to guard against boarding parties. Sir, his communications officer called out, we're getting strange reports from the outer perimeter. 3 ships claim they've detected human infiltrators, but their security teams can't find anyone. False alarms, Kextar said firmly. Maybe, sir. But Captain Zorvel on the Iron Fist is convinced he saw someone in his corridor cameras. He sealed his entire ship and gone to emergency protocols. Kexatar felt a headache building behind his eyes. His perfect fleet was dissolving into paranoia and fear. All because of one human ship and one impossible message. On the Indomitable, the crew watched their sensors with amazement. The alien formation was falling apart before their eyes. "Captain," Weapons Officer Song Yunbi reported, "several enemy ships have activated their defensive systems. They're behaving like they're under attack, but we haven't fired a shot." "Their own fear is doing more damage than our weapons could," Lee observed. "How long until we're in weapons range?" 14 minutes, sir." Lee thought quickly. The trick was working, but it would not work forever. Eventually, the aliens would realize that there was only one human ship. When that happened, they would stop panicking and start shooting. He needed to keep them confused for as long as possible. "Tactical," he said to Kim So-young. "I want you to charge our main cannon, but don't target anything specific. Just let them see the energy buildup." "Sir, they'll detect the weapons charging on their sensors. They'll know we're getting ready to fire, but they won't know what we're aiming at. That uncertainty will make them more nervous." Kim nodded and worked her controls. The Indomitable's main particle cannon began to charge. Energy flowed through the weapon systems. The ship's power signature changed as more electricity was diverted to weapons. Across the alien fleet, sensor operators detected the change immediately. "Human ship is charging weapons," reported the sensor officer on the Dark Spear. "Target?" asked Captain Vexmon. "Unknown, sir. They're not locking onto anything specific." Vexmon felt sweat beading on his gray skin. What were they targeting? His ship? The flagship? Or were they planning something else entirely? He was not the only captain asking the same questions. Throughout the Valtharian fleet, hundreds of officers were trying to guess what the humans were planning. The uncertainty was worse than knowing they were about to be attacked. On the battleship Thunderlord, Captain Kemtar made a fateful decision. If the humans were charging weapons, he would charge his too. Better to be ready than sorry. All weapons, maximum charge. Target the human ship when they come into range, but as his weapons charged, they created their own energy signature. Other ships detected it and assumed the Thunderlord was preparing to fire at them. More ships charged their weapons in response. Within minutes, half the Valtharian fleet had weapons charged and ready. They were all aiming at different targets. Some at the human ship, some at each other, some at empty space where they thought cloaked ships might be hiding. The fleet was one accident away from destroying itself. Admiral Kextar watched the chaos with growing horror. His carefully planned attack was turning into a nightmare. Ships were breaking formation. Weapons were charged. Crews were panicking. And all because of one human destroyer that had not even fired a shot yet. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "recommend we order all ships to power down weapons. The situation is getting dangerous." Before Kextar could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the bridge. "Collision alert!" shouted the navigation officer. "3 ships in the 2nd Squadron are on collision course." On the main display, Kextar watched as 2 destroyers and a cruiser tried to occupy the same piece of space. Their captains had been so focused on the human threat that they had forgotten basic navigation. The 3 ships twisted and turned, trying to avoid each other. Their engines fired at full power, thrusters blazed, but they were too close and moving too fast. The first collision was almost gentle. The destroyer Swift Wind scraped along the side of the cruiser Dark Moon. Sparks flew as metal ground against metal. Hull plates buckled. Windows shattered. The second collision was much worse. The other destroyer, the Night Strike, slammed into the Swift Wind at full speed. The smaller ship crumpled like paper. Its reactor went critical instantly. The explosion lit up space like a new star. The blast vaporized the Night Strike completely. The Swift Wind broke apart, its pieces spinning away into the darkness. The Dark Moon was badly damaged but still functional. The explosion was visible to every ship in the fleet. Suddenly, the theoretical threat of human weapons became very real. 3 ships had just been destroyed and the humans had not even fired yet. "Accident or attack," whispered one officer. "Had to be the humans," said another. "They must have some new weapon." The panic spread faster than before. If humans could destroy ships without visible weapons, what else could they do? Captain Lee watched the explosion through the Indomitable's sensors. He felt sick. Those were enemy ships, but they were still people. People who had died because of fear and confusion. "Sir," Kim So-young said quietly, "the alien fleet is in complete chaos. Some ships are trying to retreat. Others are advancing to attack. A few are firing at each other." Lee nodded grimly. The plan was working too well. He had wanted to confuse the enemy, not make them destroy themselves. But there was no stopping it now. Fear had taken control of the Valtharian fleet, and fear, once unleashed, was almost impossible to contain. The Indomitable continued its approach toward an enemy fleet that was tearing itself apart. The explosion of the 3 Valtharian ships created a shockwave that rippled through the entire fleet. Not a physical shockwave, but something much more dangerous. A shockwave of pure panic. Admiral Kekstar stood on his bridge and watched his life's work crumble. 30 years of military service, hundreds of battles, thousands of victories, and now one human ship was destroying everything he had built. "Status report," he ordered, his voice barely controlled. "Swift wind and night strike are gone, sir," his tactical officer reported. "Dark Moon is heavily damaged but still operational. Casualty reports are coming in from across the fleet." "Casualties? From what?" "Ships are reporting injuries from emergency maneuvers, sir. Some crews are so scared they're activating emergency protocols and sealing themselves in compartments. Medical teams can't reach injured personnel." Kekstar closed his 4 eyes and tried to think. How had it come to this? He commanded the most powerful fleet in Valtharian history. He had enough firepower to destroy a dozen human colonies, and yet one human destroyer was making his entire armada look like frightened children. "Sir," the communications officer called. "Out. We're receiving multiple distress calls. Captain Mordak on the Steelhammer reports his crew is in mutiny. Captain Veltara on the Stormbringer is requesting immediate evacuation. And Captain—" "Enough!" Kekstar roared. "Signal all ships, reform battle lines. Focus on the human vessel. This ends now." But even as he gave the order, he knew it was too late. Fear had infected his fleet like a plague, and plagues did not care about orders. On the heavy cruiser Dark Spear, Captain Vexmon was dealing with his own crisis. His security chief had just reported something impossible. "Sir, we found evidence of intruders in Section 7. "What kind of evidence?" "Footprints, sir. In the dust near the auxiliary airlock. Fresh ones." Vexmon felt his heart skip a beat. "How many intruders?" "Hard to say, sir. Maybe 3 or 4. The prints are different, not Valtharian." "Human?" "Could be, sir." Vexmon looked at his tactical display. The human ship was still 400,000 kilometers away, too far to have sent boarding parties, unless they had some kind of teleportation technology, or personal stealth fields, or he was letting his imagination run wild. But human. Technology was supposed to be impossible to understand. They did things that should not work. "Seal all sections," he ordered. "Deploy security teams throughout the ship. If there are humans aboard, I want them found." The Dark Spear went into full lockdown. Blast doors slammed shut. Marines ran through the corridors with weapons ready. The ship became a fortress, but the footprints had been made by maintenance technician Corval, who had been cleaning the auxiliary airlock 2 hours earlier. He wore different boots than the rest of the crew, standard equipment boots that left unusual prints in the dust. Nobody thought to ask him about it. Everyone was too scared to think clearly. The same scene was playing out across the fleet. Ships were finding evidence of human infiltrators everywhere. Strange noises in the walls, shadows in empty corridors, equipment that had been moved mysteriously. All of it had normal explanations. But fear made normal things seem sinister. On the Indomitable, Captain Lee watched the alien fleet's behavior with growing amazement. Ships were breaking formation constantly. Some were clustering together in tight defensive groups. Others were spreading out as far as possible. A few had stopped moving entirely and were just sitting in space with all weapons pointed in different directions. "Captain," Navigator Oh Tae-young reported, "we're getting some strange readings from the enemy fleet. Several ships have activated emergency beacons. Others are dumping atmosphere from their airlocks, and at least 6 vessels appear to be preparing for emergency jumps to hyperspace." "They're scaring themselves to death," Lee observed. How much longer until we're in weapons range? 8 minutes, sir. Lee nodded. 8 minutes to figure out how to end this without getting his crew killed. The psychological warfare was working perfectly. Too perfectly. He had wanted to confuse the enemy, not make them destroy themselves. Tactical, he said to Kim So-young. What's the status of their weapons? Most ships have weapons charged and ready, sir, but they're not coordinating their fire. Some are targeting us, others are targeting each other. A few seem to be aiming at empty space. Good. Keep monitoring them. Let me know if they start working together again. On the bridge of the Eternal Dominion, Admiral Kextar was fighting a losing battle against chaos. Reports flooded in from across his fleet. Ships were reporting everything from system failures to full-scale boarding actions. Admiral, his second-in-command Zethuk said quietly, perhaps we should consider withdrawal. Regroup and attack with a different strategy. Kextar wanted to hit him. 30 years of victories, and now his own officers were suggesting retreat from a single enemy ship. But maybe Zethok was right. Maybe this was what the humans wanted. Maybe they were trying to lure the fleet into some kind of trap. Sir, the sensor operator called out. The human ship is doing something new. All eyes turned to the main display. The single green dot that represented the human destroyer was changing course slightly. Instead of heading straight for the center of the fleet, it was angling toward the left flank. What are they targeting? Kextar asked. Unknown, sir. Could be the supply ships. Could be the command vessels. Could be anything. The uncertainty was maddening. What were the humans planning? Captain Lee had changed course for a simple reason. Navigation Officer Oh Tae-young had found a route through the alien formation that would cause maximum confusion with minimum risk. By heading for the left flank, they would force dozens of alien ships to turn and adjust their positions. Sir, Communications Specialist Park Ji-woo reported. The alien chatter is getting worse. I'm hearing reports of human commandos, cloaked ships, and something called ghost soldiers on at least 20 different vessels. Ghost soldiers? I think it means stealth troops, sir. They're convinced we've landed boarding parties on their ships. Lee shook his head. The human reputation for impossible tactics was doing more damage than any weapon could. Engineering, he called to Chief Engineer Choi Min-ho. How's our power situation? Holding steady, sir. Weapons are at full charge, but I can't give you much more. The reactor is running hot. Understood, keep me informed. In the engine room of the Indomitable, Choi Min-ho worked frantically to keep their systems running. Sweat poured down his face as he moved from console to console. The ship was pushing beyond its design limits, but somehow holding together. He had served on human ships for 15 years. He had seen them do impossible things before. But this was different. This time, they were not just fighting aliens. They were fighting the aliens' own fears. And fear was winning. On the destroyer Swift Strike, Captain Nixtal made a decision that would change everything. She had been watching the human ship's approach with growing terror. In 3 minutes it would be close enough to attack. She could not wait any longer. All weapons, she ordered. Fire everything at the human ship. Now. Her weapons officer looked confused. Captain, they're still out of effective range. I don't care. Fire now. The Swift Strike opened fire with everything it had. Energy beams and missiles streaked across space toward the Indomitable. Other captains saw the weapons fire and assumed the battle had started. Within seconds, dozens of ships were firing at the lone human destroyer. The space around the Indomitable filled with explosions and energy beams, but they were firing from too far away. Most shots went wide. The few that came close were easily dodged by Navigator Oh Tae-young's skilled maneuvering. Evasive action, Captain Lee ordered calmly. Stay on course, but keep us alive. The Indomitable twisted and turned through the storm of fire. Energy beams flashed past the hull. Missiles exploded harmlessly in space. The ship's shields flared as a few shots found their mark but held firm. To the alien fleet, it looked like the human ship was dancing through their weapons fire. Untouchable, unstoppable. Like the legends said, more ships opened fire, then more. Soon, half the Valtharian fleet was shooting at the Indomitable, but in their panic, some ships were also shooting at each other. The cruiser Iron Will took a direct hit from the battleship Stormlord. The Stormlord's captain had been aiming at the human ship but hit his own ally instead. Friendly fire. The Iron Will's captain screamed over the communication channels. "We're taking fire from our own fleet." The message caused even more confusion. If their own ships were shooting at each other, who could they trust? What if the humans had somehow taken control of some vessels? The paranoia spread like wildfire. Ships that had been focusing on the human threat now started watching each other with suspicion. Admiral Kextar watched his fleet tear itself apart and felt something break inside his chest. This was not battle. This was not war. This was madness. And in the middle of it all, one small human destroyer continued its approach. Still alone. Still outnumbered. Still somehow winning against impossible odds. The legend of human warfare was becoming reality before his eyes, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The Valtharian 47th Battle Fleet was dying, not from human weapons, but from its own fear. Ships fired at shadows, captains gave contradictory orders, crews abandoned their posts and hid in sealed compartments. Admiral Kextar watched the destruction with hollow eyes. In 30 years of military service, he had never seen anything like this. His fleet was destroying itself, and he was powerless to stop it. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "we've lost contact with 17 ships. 8 have suffered critical damage from friendly fire. 5 more have jumped to hyperspace without orders. And the rest are barely functional." Kextar nodded slowly. The humans had won without firing a shot. It was impossible. It was insane. It was perfectly human. On the Indomitable, Captain Lee Dae-ho watched the chaos with mixed feelings. Part of him was amazed by their success. They had faced impossible odds and somehow survived. But another part of him felt sick. Those were real people dying out there, real ships being destroyed, real lives being lost. "Captain," Communications Specialist Park Ji-woo called out, "I'm receiving surrender requests from multiple alien vessels. They want to know what terms you'll accept." Lee blinked in surprise. "Surrender requests?" "Yes, sir. 12 ships so far. They're convinced they can't win and want to give up before we destroy them." Executive Officer Kwon Yun-soo moved to stand beside the captain's chair. She had been quiet during most of the battle, watching and learning. Now she spoke for the first time in an hour. "Sir," she said quietly, "what do we do? We can't actually accept their surrender. We don't have the resources to process prisoners or secure captured ships." Lee thought quickly. She was right. The Indomitable was a single destroyer with a crew of 200. They could not possibly manage hundreds of alien prisoners and dozens of captured vessels. But maybe they did not need to. "Communications," he said to Park Ji-woo, "send a reply to all ships requesting surrender. Tell them to power down weapons and maintain position. We'll process their surrenders after we finish with the rest of the fleet." It was a bluff, but it might buy them time. The message went out across the alien fleet. Ships that had been preparing to fight suddenly found hope in surrender. Weapons powered down, shields dropped. Entire vessels just stopped moving and waited for human boarding parties that would never come. On the heavy cruiser Dark Spear, Captain Vexmon received the surrender terms with relief. His ship had suffered heavy damage from friendly fire. His crew was exhausted from hunting imaginary human intruders. He was ready for this nightmare to end. "All weapons, power down," he ordered. "Maintain position and await further orders from the human commander." His crew obeyed with obvious relief. The stress of the last hour had aged them all by years. Similar scenes played out across the fleet. Ship after ship powered down and surrendered, not to superior firepower but to superior psychological warfare. But not everyone was ready to give up. Admiral Kextar still commanded the most powerful ship in the fleet. The dreadnought Eternal Dominion had enough firepower to destroy the human destroyer 10 times over. "Sir," Sethok said carefully, "perhaps we should consider the surrender option. We could regroup later with fresh ships and—" "No," Kextar said firmly. "I will not surrender to a single enemy ship. I will not let my career end in disgrace." He turned to his weapons officer. Target the human vessel. Prepare to fire everything we have. The weapons officer hesitated. Sir, at this range we can't miss, but if we fire, the other ships might think we're breaking the ceasefire. There is no ceasefire. There is only victory or defeat, and I choose victory. The Eternal Dominion's massive weapons began to charge. The ship's power signature changed as enormous amounts of energy flowed to the gun systems. Every sensor in the fleet detected the buildup immediately. On the indomitable, weapons officer Song Yunbi saw the threat developing. Captain, the enemy flagship is charging weapons, massive energy signature. They're preparing to fire everything they have. Lee felt his stomach drop. This was it, the moment when their bluff would be called. One direct hit from that dreadnought would vaporize his ship and crew. Evasive maneuvers, he ordered. Best speed away from the flagship. Navigator Oh Tae-young worked his controls frantically. The Indomitable turned and accelerated, trying to get out of the dreadnought's firing arc. But they were still too close, still too exposed. Time to weapons range, Lee asked. 30 seconds, sir. 30 seconds to live. Lee looked around his bridge at the crew who had trusted him to get them home safely. Good people. Brave people. They deserved better than to die because of his crazy plan. But then something unexpected happened. Captain Vexmon on the Dark Spear saw the flagship charging weapons and panicked. He had surrendered. His crew was defenseless. If the flagship started shooting, it would trigger another battle. His ship would be caught in the crossfire. Emergency jump, he ordered. Get us out of here now. The Dark Spear vanished in a flash of light as it jumped to hyperspace. Other surrendered ships saw the jump and panicked too. If ships were fleeing, the ceasefire must be over. The battle was starting again. More ships jumped to hyperspace, then more. Within minutes, dozens of vessels were abandoning the battlefield. The careful formation that Admiral Kexatar had spent hours creating dissolved completely. Ships scattered in all directions. Some fled to hyperspace. Others tried to hide behind asteroids. A few brave captains tried to reform battle lines, but there were not enough ships left to make a difference. Sir, the Eternal Dominion's tactical officer reported, we're losing the fleet. Half our ships have jumped away. The others are scattered across the system. Kextar stared at the display in disbelief. His perfect armada was gone. 347 ships reduced to a handful of stragglers and one lone human destroyer. Fire, he ordered quietly. The Eternal Dominion opened fire with everything it had. Massive energy beams reached out across space toward the Indomitable. But the human ship was small and fast. Oh Tae-young's skilled piloting kept them just ahead of the dreadnought's targeting systems. The shots were close enough to overload. The Indomitable's shields, close enough to melt armor plating on the hull, but not close enough to destroy them. Jump drive ready, Chief Engineer Choi Min-ho reported. We can get out of here, Captain. Lee looked at the tactical display. The alien fleet was broken, scattered, defeated. His mission was complete. It was time to go home. Do it, he ordered. The Indomitable vanished in a flash of light, leaving behind the wreckage of the most powerful fleet the Valtharian Empire had ever assembled. Admiral Kextar stood alone on his bridge and looked at the empty space where the human ship had been. Around him, the few remaining ships of his fleet waited for orders that he could not give. He had commanded 347 vessels. Now he had maybe 30. The rest were destroyed, scattered, or fled to hyperspace. One human ship had done this. One small destroyer with a crew of 200 had defeated an entire battle fleet. How was he supposed to explain this to the Emperor? Hours later, in the safe darkness of hyperspace, Captain Lee Dae-ho sat in his quarters and wrote his mission report. The words came slowly. How do you describe something that should have been impossible? Mission completed successfully, he wrote. Enemy fleet encountered and neutralized. No human casualties. Minimal damage to ship. He paused and stared at the screen. That was the official version. The version that would go in the history books. But it did not tell the real story. The real story was about fear, about reputation, about how sometimes the greatest victory comes not from superior firepower, but from the enemy's own imagination. The human species had been in space for only a few hundred years. They were young and inexperienced compared to the ancient alien empires. But they had something the old empires did not have. They had a reputation for doing impossible things. And sometimes, reputation was the most powerful weapon of all. On distant Earth, news of the battle spread quickly through the defense force. One ship against an entire alien armada. Victory without firing a shot. It sounded impossible, but the sensor logs did not lie. The story grew with each telling. By the time it reached the outer colonies, Captain Lee had single-handedly destroyed half the enemy fleet. By the time it reached Allied worlds, the Indomitable had been outnumbered 1,000 to 1. The truth did not matter. The legend was better. And across the galaxy, alien commanders heard the story and made a note in their files. When sensors detected a human warship, perhaps the wisest course was to simply look the other way. The Valtharian Empire quietly withdrew from human space. Other alien powers followed their example, not because they were defeated, but because they were afraid of what humans might do if cornered. Captain Lee Dae-ho never knew that his desperate bluff had changed the balance of power in the galaxy. He went back to his normal duties, flying, patrol missions, and hunting pirates. Just another starship captain doing his job, but his name lived on in the stories. The human captain who faced impossible odds and won through courage and cunning. The man who proved that sometimes the best weapon is the one you never have to fire. The legend of human warfare grew stronger, and somewhere in the darkness between the stars, other alien fleets made careful note of the lesson.